Hello and welcome to LGBTQ plus Storytime Community History. I'm and let me bring on my co-host, DrBev. Hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I am great. And yourself?
Excellent. Couldn't be better.
Oh my gosh. I am so sorry that Jasmine can't join us, but we'll go into why. Because all three of us got together with our next guest. Gosh, was that like a week ago? Was that only a week ago?
That was only about a week ago. That wasn't yeah.
So, but before that, so I do want to talk a little bit about kind of why we're kind of doing this LGBT Storytime. And so basically, it is part of the Arizona LGBT plus History Project. Now, we also have support from the Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture, as well as South Mountain Storytelling Institute. So thank you all so much for helping make this a reality. We are a collaboration between Phoenix Pride ASU Libraries with the BJ Budd Archives and myself, Marshall Shore. And we just finished Phoenix Pride.
Yay!
Indeed. So some highlights for me was getting the chance to share some LGBTQ history in one of the tents there. So that was a lot of fun. And also Sister Navi Ho, she was there with an Indigenous drag review. So that was kind of a hoot. And also getting a chance to stand next to our mayor, Kate Gallego. So that was a lot of fun. And then so also walking in the parade at the very end, there were those protesters. And so I was walking with the Sister Special Indulgence, and so we actually were able to block them. But the beautiful thing was there were only like 5 of us, but people kept joining us. It wound up being this. I actually broke down in tears a couple times because it was just so beautiful of seeing so many people, so much diversity there. They're just kind of helping protect people from hearing that hate, that vile speech that they were spitting out. Right. So, and several years ago, with the Pride Parade, they always have marshals. And one year we had a woman named Dot Wilkinson as a marshal of the parade.
Right.
And so I was kind of her handler. And I bring that up today because I am so excited to bring on. Oh, wait a minute. I clicked on the wrong button.
There you go.
All right. Yeah. So hello, Lynn.
Hey, how are you, Marshall? Hi, Dr. Bev.
Hi, Lynn. How are you?
Great to see you again.
Yes.
So, Lynn, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, I am the author of 16 novels and 1 biography, the brand new biography of the aforesaid mentioned Dot Wilkinson, the greatest catcher ever to play softball. I met Dot back in 2010 when I was doing an internet television show. And the rest, as they say, is history. We became family to one another. And over a course of a dozen years, Dot and I spoke every single day. So I well remember when she was Grand Marshal of the parade. She was very, very excited about that. She thought that was the greatest thing.
I'm happy to hear that because she was downplaying it with me. She was kind of like, oh, yeah. Oh, I did that.
That's Dot. She downplayed everything except for, when she was on the field trash talking.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah. And I got her name actually from Rose Mofford, and she just said her number is in the book.
Yeah.
And of course I looked it up and there it was. And I was so nervous. It was like a couple times I looked it up. Okay, I'm not going to call because I'm just too starstruck. But then I let it ring and she answered.
Mm-hmm. Hello, she'd say, hello.
And we had this great conversation. Yeah. So
yeah, she was very approachable. Dot loved everybody. She was absolutely a people person. And so she probably would have talked your ear off for a long time if you let her. Did you let her?
I did, and I didn't think it was talking my ear off because it was so exciting to actually hear her voice, hear her talking about some of her history and things. And so really happy to be able to share that. So tell us a little bit about Dot.
Yeah. So I could tell you a book's worth about
it. Indeed.
And more, but here are some of the highlights. So Dot was born and bred in Phoenix, lived in Phoenix, South Phoenix to be specific, all her life. And she never wanted to leave. That was her spot. And she was born on a farm on 10 acres of land along Baseline Road, which Baseline and Rozier Road.
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere in that area. And the farm, her parents came from England. Her parents were middle class in England. They came to Phoenix, don't even ask, and started this farm, which they didn't know how to farm. They didn't know anything, but they started this farm anyway. So they had her dad and her mom would run the farm. Her mom would carry little Dot in a sack behind her while she was picking corn and picking cotton on the farm. So back then, there were no roads in Phoenix at the time except for dirt roads. This was 1921, dirt roads. And her mom at first would take her older sister Joan and her brother Bill to market on a horse-drawn carriage on the trail that was the same trail that went to market that the indigenous folks used to go to market. And one day she told me the story one time about one day her older sister Joan apparently went home with some of these people that she'd met. And they went back and they fetched her and they brought her back like it was nothing. It was like, well, yeah. So Joan ended up on the reservation and they brought her back. Like, some things you cannot make up. But there was no running water in their home, and Dot was always a little bit embarrassed about that. So she would never, as a child, invite her girlfriends home. She would only invite her guy friends home, and you can imagine what the difference was there and why she felt that way. I'm not going to spell it out, but you can read between the lines, if you will. But so she came from very, very humble beginnings, and she never ever forgot that. Dot was who she was. She was very plain spoken. She was not good in school. She went to Roosevelt Elementary School, which was Roosevelt Grammar School, I think, at the time, and she didn't like school, so she just wanted to play on the playground, So she would play on the playground, and that's how she got discovered by a 6th grade teacher named Ford Hoffman, who was teaching at Roosevelt. And he watched her one day in this track meet pick up this baseball and throw it. And he saw that and he's like, wow, and he walks up to her and he says, how would you like to someday play on a team that goes to the World Championships in Chicago? Well, Dot had absolutely zero idea where Chicago was. She'd never been out of South Phoenix. She didn't know anything. She said, sure, because it meant she could play baseball. She could play softball. And that's all she wanted to do was play ball. And that was the moment. That was it. It really informed the rest of her life. But much of her childhood spent in Phoenix was sort of carefree and easy in terms of, she would ride horses with her buddies, a couple of boys who lived in the neighborhood, and they would ride bareback everywhere. She had a horse named Babe. And she, when she was 8 years old, she almost lost her right arm. Her right arm, think about this, right-handed, almost lost her right arm at 8 years old because there were 2 working horses on the farm. And the horses, her mom told her very clearly, you don't go near those horses. Those are not horses that you ride. Those are work horses. And of course, you can't tell Dot that because what would you do? I mean, the first thing you do is run straight toward it, right? Well, that's what Dot did. So she goes and she puts her hand under the fence, her right hand under the fence. I don't know whether she was trying to get under the fence. It's all I can think. But essentially, the horse pawed at her and tore all the skin off her right forearm. So everything is hanging out of her right forearm. And she goes and she lies to her mother and tells her mother that she was trying to feed the horse. She wasn't trying to feed that horse, as she readily told me. She was trying to ride that horse because her mom said she couldn't. And that is, essentially that encapsulates exactly who Dot was, right? But the doctor wanted to amputate her arm. And her dad bless him, said, no, that's not going to happen, because it got infected, and it was all gangrene and everything else. And her dad, for 30 days, took her back into town to this doctor every day to have the thing cleaned out and redressed and so on and so forth. And after 30 days, she finally had healed. So without that intervention, we would not have, Dot Wilkinson, the greatest catcher who ever played women's ball. Thank God for her dad's stubbornness, which was almost equal to Dot's. Not quite, but almost equal to Dot's. And, for her ability to heal. So about 80 years later, she showed me the scar, which was still on her arm. Still bore the scar from that.
Wow.
But, Dot was tenacious. She was relentless. You absolutely did not want to be her opponent on the ball field. But if she was your friend, she was your best friend forever. That was just, Dot was loyal. And her friends were her friends for life. And she looked after them always. That was the way she looked at life. Relationships were what mattered to her more than ball, even, which is hard to believe that anything mattered to her more than ball. But relationships, in the end, she would say, is what she really had. That was what mattered to her. What else you want to know?
Wow. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's like, so, okay, so here she is, a ball player. I'm sure they didn't make much money.
They didn't make any money.
So
she didn't make, well, let me say this. Let me clarify something that a lot of people believe incorrectly. Dot was not the catcher that Gina Davis's character is based on in the movie A League of Their Own. She is not that catcher. She, in fact, was asked to play in that league. I actually have the letter in which she was recruited to play in that league, and she turned them down. She turned them down because she didn't want to wear a skirt to play ball, because she didn't want to go to charm school, which is what they did every night, and because, frankly, on this show, it's very easy to say this, and frankly, because they were whitewashing the idea that these people were lesbians, which most of them were. But they didn't want anyone to know that. So they required the players to have a chaperone at all times. They required them to wear lipstick, full makeup, and a dress when they, I know, right? When they went out in public. They were not allowed to wear pants. They were not allowed to fraternize with each other. And if they got caught, they got kicked out. And Dot, frankly, wasn't going along with that. Nope, that wasn't going to happen for her. So she said no to $85 a week, which in that day and age was quite a bit of money, especially for a kid like Dot who didn't have any.
Right.
So she was unwilling to compromise who she was in order to go play in that league. And what Dot said to me many years later, of course, was those weren't the best players anyway. We had the best players. Those were, but some of her friends went and played. Those weren't the best players. This was the best league. There was better play going on in the amateurs, on the amateur side, than there was on this side. But she said that the people, Penny Marshall and those who were making the movie, approached her and asked her if they could model the catcher after her and if she would consult on the movie. And she said, let me think about it. No.
Wow.
She wasn't interested. So she said no to them. And they created the character Dottie Hinson, Gina Davis. I would argue that some of her characteristics look remarkably similar to Dot's. But the character was not strictly based on Dot. It was actually an amalgamation of other players, of all kinds of players, multiple players that went into that. But Dot would tell me that she got asked that question so often, after a while, she'd just say, okay, because she got tired of explaining that it wasn't her. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you bring up a good point about just the number of lesbians playing on the field. So how important were these softball games to the lesbian community? I mean, here in Phoenix, but also across the country, wherever there were teams.
Think about this. Back in that day and age, you certainly weren't out. And how, finding each other wasn't always easy. But they had commonality in playing ball. and in being fans of ball games, right? Because that's where the lesbians were. That's where the queer girls were. So you could find them by going to a ball game. And so they all became very tight knit and they hung out with each other. They found each other. They found community in a way that they couldn't find it elsewhere in the world safely. But on the ball field, that was another story. Now, I will tell you that in the 30s, when softball first started to rise, there weren't as many lesbians, queer girls playing ball. There were a lot of straight women, straight girls playing ball back then. By the time you get to the war years around 1940 or so, that starts to shift and you find more lesbians, more queers playing softball. They found their people, as we always do. and that, was really the start of it. So it was a safe place to be. You could be yourself on the ball field. You could play like there were no limitations on you. Yeah, play like a girl, I say. But they didn't have to be quite so ultra feminine on the field. They could just be themselves, and that was a great comfort to them. And they were sort of Dot would say that they were sort of insulated because of playing ball. It was permissible. But I'll tell you this: outside of the ball field, there was a lot more difficulty. For instance, Kay Rich, who was one of the greatest players ever, who played for the Fresno Rockets. Kay was a lesbian. I don't think she'd mind me telling you that now. She's gone. Sadly, she was a wonderful human being. But Kay told me that she was a teacher, and she also had gotten her certification to be a basketball referee. But her physical education teacher in college essentially told her, you have to quit softball because those people play softball. And if you play softball, you're going to lose your teaching certificate. You're not going to get to be able to be a teacher. You're not going to be able to be a referee. And, Kay, thank goodness, refused to quit. But they did take away her basketball refereeing certification because she was associating with people, because it was such a clear association that you must be a lesbian by that time if you're playing softball. That would have been in the 40s, maybe the early 50s, if I'm trying to place the time frame for you. Yeah. I mean, look at Larry Walker, who coached the A1 Queens in Phoenix. Larry Walker created the A1 Queens in 1937, and he clearly told the Arizona Highways, I think, before. Maybe he told the Arizona Republic before he told the Arizona Highways, but he was willing to tell anybody that he picked his team based on how good looking they were. He didn't want them to look like, yeah, I know, right? He didn't want them to look like lesbians. He didn't want them to be lesbians. He wanted them to be very feminine. He said, my qualifications are that first, their feminine charm and their beauty and and lastly, their ball playing ability. He said, I bet you I could fill the stands even if they never won a game. This was how he thought about it. I know it's jaw-dropping, right? Jaw-dropping that he would first think that and second say it. And Dot, there was no love lost between Larry Walker and Dot Wilkinson. But, Dot, when she told me this story, said to me, it was such a laugh. If he had only any idea how many lesbians he had on his team. And one of the people she pointed to was one of her prior girlfriends who passed away very young, Kay Rohr. Kay Rohr, who played for the Ramblers from 1954 to her death in 1962. Kay Rohr was a movie star before she was a softball player. And you got to look in the book because there's this picture of Kay Rohr pitching for the Bank of America team in 1936 with her long dark hair flowing off. I mean, she looks like Vivian Leigh. If I had to, give you someone to look at she looks like Vivian Leigh. And, so she played for the A1 Queens in 1948. Larry Walker, no doubt, thought she was straight as an arrow, but she was, I'm sorry, nowhere near straight as an arrow. Nope. Well,
and I know it's like in those softball years, for the audience, it was the same thing. It was the lesbian social outing. It's like you didn't miss a game because that's where your community was.
Exactly. You could go and root freely for these people. And, you know, I'm back in that day, I don't want to say, I can't put, you know, words in people's mouth, but I imagine they were ogling some of the girls, you know, going, you know, and they probably went out and partied with them afterwards, you know.
So that brings up a point also. So there was like Case Happy Landing, which was a bar in South Phoenix from the early 40s. So did they go to the bars after the game?
No, they did not go to Case Happy Landing, although, well, I can tell you one or two of them who did and got in trouble for it with Dot, because Dot really felt like they were endangering themselves. And she wanted to keep them safe and out of harm's way. Dot and, you know, some of her girlfriends would go to Patrick's Park, which is a straight bar, was a straight bar. I don't think it exists anymore, does it? I don't think so. But they went to Patrick's Park because, and they went to the 902 and 307. Does that sound right?
Oh, wow. And the 307?
Yeah. And, you know, because one place was better for shuffleboard and one place was better for pool. And Patrick's Park was great for dancing. But, you know, so they would go to the straight bars and they would dance with each other and nobody would think a thing of it. You know, the regulars liked having the ball players around. That was great. And in fact, one night, Dot told me this story. This must have been in the late 40s or early 1950s. One night, a straight couple came in and started hassling the players. And they got into a big fight. And the fight spilled out into the parking lot at Patrick's Park. And Dot's in the middle of this, and several other players, and Dobby's and several other players are in the middle of this fight. And all of their straight allies, you know, regulars at the bar, came out and fought with them. And in the end, I don't think the cops came. I don't think anything, you know, they all lived to tell another day. Dot lost her bracelet, though. She was very upset about that. And the next day she had to go back and find it in the parking lot. She found her bracelet. But when they created Dot and Ford Hoffman, who for many years, he founded the Ramblers and for many years managed them. They managed the Ramblers together at one point. In 1950, they created their own field, Rambler Field, in the middle of downtown Phoenix. And when they created Rambler Field, Dot made certain that they created a clubhouse underneath the stadium so that after the games, the players could go into the clubhouse and they could dance and have fun and dance with each other and be themselves, and nobody would know. There they were in their own little world. Occasionally, they would invite some of the opponents in to party with them. Occasionally, you know, if there was beer left over from the concessions, they'd bring the beer in and whatever food they had, you know. But she gave them a safe space so they would not go to the gay bars. Now, I'm not going to name names, but I do know a couple of players who sort of bucked Dot with that and did go to Kay's Happy Landing. It did not go well for them. She had to go fetch them.
And I'm sure she was not happy at all about that.
I'm certain that I would not want to have been them.
Right.
Just saying. I'm sure it did not go well.
So, okay, so they're partying in these clubhouses. Sometimes they'll invite the opponent team.
Yeah.
So how did they meet girlfriends?
Other players. They were all going with each other. You know, and Dot, I have to parse what Dot really means sometimes. You know, terminology from back in the day is not the same as it is today. Like, for instance, she would say things to me like, well, you know, Ricky and I got friendly in 19, you know, whatever. And I'm thinking, what does that mean exactly? Mm-hmm. Got friendly. And then I realized that it has a whole different meaning from what we think of as, you know, oh, yeah, we got friendly, you know, meaning we were just friends. No, I don't think so. Not where she was going with that. No. It took me a long time to catch on. A little slow, but it's okay. I got there eventually. But I'm losing my train of thought. So yes, they would find each other on the ball fields or in the stands. you know, but they all hung out together as a group. Dot would try to tell me, you know, we all hung out together as a group. And, you know, sometimes people would pair off in the group. That was just the way it was. And sometimes they switched partners and moved on, you know, like we do. And that was just the way it was. So, yeah, like we do. So, yes. So she would, all of her partners were ball players. Partners were other ball players.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the players that I could name who had partners, their partners were also ball players. I'm not going to out anybody else, but I'm just going to say.
No, but that makes very much sense. I mean, that was the community they hung out in, so of course.
Yeah. Yeah. But interestingly, you know, I would say to her, well, it must have been, you know, helpful to be on the road then for ball games, because they drove to all these ball games and stayed in all these motels. And she said, well, no, because, you know, they didn't have money to stay in hotels, nice hotels and things. So they would bunk 6 to a room.
Whoa.
Yeah. Not exactly conducive to having a great time. Just saying.
No,
so,
right. No privacy. I mean,
no privacy.
You can't give any friendly time.
No friendly time. Exactly. And I would say, well, how did you guys, you know, how'd you find time? And she would say, well, we just did, you know, she would, you know, drop all the players off and her girlfriend would be the last one dropped off, for instance, you know, like one does.
Right.
You always
back in the day.
Always make a way.
Always make a way. Exactly right. There was always a way.
When you look at today,
mm-hmm.
and look at the past, and you see how, and I'll use the basketball team
mm-hmm.
and the Mercuries, and now that the women are, they can say and express who they really truly are.
Yeah.
And society has not verbally pressured them. However, they don't have to hide behind makeup and dresses and, you know.
Thank God, right?
That. I can you imagine having BG in a dress? Come on now.
No, I don't think BG can imagine being in a dress and having to do that. But, you know, it wasn't that long ago, Dr. Bev. If you think about this, it wasn't all that long ago that they were all in the closet. I know this because Bridget Pettis was a good friend of mine. And Bridget, you know, was one of the original Phoenix Mercury. And Bridget and I talked at one point about doing a book. We talked at one point about doing a book that she wanted to do coming out. She wanted to come out, and she would have been the first. If we, you know, if it had gone to fruition, she probably would have been the first to come out. She had finished playing. She was coaching at the time, but still,
mm-hmm.
If I think back, I can date it for you. That was probably, I want to say maybe 2007, maybe 2008. Wasn't in all that long ago that none of them were actually out. You know, they came busting out of the closet in the last, you know, eight years or so, 8, maybe 10 maximum. It wasn't that long ago that none of them were out.
I'm thinking back because I've known Bridget and a very,
mm-hmm.
very good friend of her auntie and a few of the other players.
Yeah.
And because I knew them, I knew they were out, and I've gone to a couple of their gatherings.
Yeah.
But then when I started hearing it publicly, I was like, oh, it's okay. Nobody's saying anything.
Yeah.
Nobody's, you know,
yeah.
I don't like them anymore. You know, yeah. It's like, oh, this is good. What's happening now that we're being freed to be who we are. And then I think back of the past and how it was when I lived through the past and how we hardly ever got to see the ball players because I went to the girl bars that were here in Phoenix.
Right.
And they weren't there.
No. Do you remember that you reminding me, you remember, I don't remember what year it was, but I was still living in Phoenix, and it was pretty early from the time I was living in Phoenix that there was a kerfuffle when Diana Taurasi got into some kind of altercation with, it was some of the Seattle Storm players. It was Lauren and Sue, and well, it wasn't Sue because they're great friends, but it was Lauren, who I think, you know, there were rumors at the time. But anyway, she got into trouble. She got a DWI You remember, she got a DWI, but part of that was the rumor mill was rife with things, but who knows what was true. I have an idea what was true, but nobody at the time, look up when that was, because nobody at the time was willing to say that it was because she'd gotten into a fight with her girlfriend and broke up with her girlfriend at the time. And that's what caused the accident. And they didn't say that they were on their way to a lesbian bar, but that's where they were either going to or coming from. And somehow that never made it into the story, into the narrative. Thank goodness at the time. But it was way before she came out, way before anybody knew anything. It was just rumors amongst ourselves.
Right.
Of us who knew.
Right. Exactly.
If you know, you know. Yeah, so it wasn't that long ago. This is very, very recent history. And like you, I am so heartened to see that now everyone can just be themselves. And, you know, as we've learned throughout history, when you are able to come out in larger numbers and everybody knows who you are, it is harder to hate you. It's harder to hate you. I mean, the reason why our trans brothers and sisters are such great targets right now is because there aren't as many of them coming out. And they are easy to bully because they are such small numbers, which is why we all need to stand up for them, right? I'll get off my soapbox, but you understand. I mean, this is why, because so many of those players came out, it was much harder to hate them. You can't hate somebody you've been rooting for 20 years, you know. It's harder to hate that.
Right.
Yeah. So thank goodness, right? The times change, which is.
Yeah. I mean, the time it's like you now have like the Compete magazine, which is LGBT sports. You know, one of the things I was surprised by at Phoenix Pride, NASCAR was there.
Really?
They were giving out NASCAR pride flags. And as a young man growing up with a Shirley Muldowney pink, drag car on my wall, I went over and I said, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you've got Travis Schumacher, who's from here, who's now racing and out. And so it's great to see all these Olympic athletes coming out and really being their authentic selves.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You remember Greg Louganis was the only one.
And it was shocking. And it was shocking that he was coming out to every, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And look at us now. I mean, just look at us now.
Right. Exactly. So you mentioned along with Dot, you mentioned the name Ricky. Who was Ricky?
So Estelle, she'll hate me for this. I'm sorry. Estelle Ricky Cato, Ricky, which actually came from her being her rookie year. And so rookie somehow became Ricky. And that's how she got the name, Ricky. So Estelle Ricky Cato, Ricky and Dot were together for 48 years, nice. Which is an extraordinary history. Ricky was the principal of the hated Orange Lionettes, the Ramblers' arch rivals. And then, Ricky and Dot fell in love and, got friendly. And they got friendly, as you do. And they and Ricky gave up her team to move here to Phoenix in 1962. In 1963, she started playing for the Phoenix Ramblers. Now, she and her girl, here's some sordid tales. She and her girlfriend, Kay Rohr, they were together in the mid to late 40s, Ricky and Kay. Follow me here because you're going to need a chart.
Like Game of Thrones, I have to sit here with my little map going, okay, who?
This is like the L Words old chart. It's kind of like an org chart, of relationships. So Ricky and Kay were together in the mid 1940s, around 1946, 47, 45, 46, 47. They were both in Chicago playing professional ball for different teams. And then they came and played for the Queens, the two of them together, Ricky and Kay. In 1948, they played for the A1 Queens. In 1949, because Kay was flirting a little bit too much with Dot, who was with Dobby at the time. Follow me. Watch this bouncing ball here, right? So Dot and Dobby were together for 16 years. Now, Ricky had a temper and was a little bit possessive and jealous. And Ricky didn't like Kay flirting with Dot. And so the two of them picked up and left, and they went to play for the New Orleans Jacks in 1949 instead. And then they broke up, Ricky and Kay. And then they broke up. And Kay came back to Phoenix. So Kay comes back to Phoenix. She can't play for an amateur team right away because she's been playing professional ball. And the rule at the time was you had to sit out a year before you could regain your amateur status. So she created a team called the Top Hats so that she didn't have to stop playing. And the Top Hats played in Phoenix for a while. They were pretty successful. And another team that she created called the Funk Gem, after Art Funk, the guy who actually built the Phoenix softball park. And so she had these various teams, and she came back to Phoenix. And Dobby didn't like how friendly Kay was with Dot. But anyway, follow this melodrama. This is better than a soap opera. People read the book. It's all in there. And then stay tuned for the next episode of As the Bat Turns. So eventually, Dobby goes off and gets married because her mom thought she was a woman lover and wanted her to go get married. So Dobby goes off in the middle of the night and goes and gets married and doesn't tell Dot, comes back, and she's married. And Dot...
To a man.
Yes, for the rest of her life. For the rest of her life. And for the rest of her life, she told Dot that Dot was her one true love, and she really regretted having gone and done that. She had kids too. So in any event, so Dobby breaks Dot's heart, and in steps Kay to console her. So now Kay and Dot get friendly. And Kay had already had one battle with breast cancer before she came to Phoenix. So Kay starts playing for the Ramblers in 1954. She and Dot get together in 1955. And in 1962, Kay at age 39 passes away from breast cancer. Now, Kay and Ricky remain friends all those years. And so Ricky, who at the time was still in Orange playing for the Lionettes, she and Dot, were talking often around, Kay being sick and so on and so forth. And when they went to California and stayed with Ricky for a week when they were setting the schedule for the Western States League for the 1962 season or 1963 season. In any event, so Kay passed away on March 17th, 1962. And a week later, Dot wins the Queen's IBC bowling tournament, which made her a great bowling sensation. This is how Dot ended up in the Bowling Hall of Fame. It was held here in Phoenix, and there's a picture. So I had to piece all of this stuff together. This was like being, like a sleuth, because Dot wasn't always very straightforward about how she, about timing. Let's just call it that. So I'm trying to piece all this stuff together and figure out how things progressed here. And I come across a picture in the newspaper of Dot on the phone. This is in the Arizona Republic. Dot is on the phone talking to someone when she wins the Queen's WIBC, Women's International Bowling Congress Championship here in Phoenix in early April, 1962. And the caption of the photo says something like, Dot's on the phone with her mother. And Dot looks at me. She says, well, that was a laugh. I was on the phone with Ricky. Ricky.
But they couldn't say that in the paper.
Really? Well, I'm sure they didn't know, right? And I'm thinking, in my head, I'm going through all the stories Dot's told me about her anniversary with Ricky being in October. And I'm thinking that the WIBC championship was actually in April, not October.
Piece it together.
Oh, Dot. And there you have it. So Dot and Ricky comes in October. Presumably she moved in with Dot. And the two of them live happily ever after as a couple, 48 years in the same house in South Phoenix on South 17th Street off Euclid. And they go into business together, flipping houses in the 1960s. But Ricky is, of course, another great, great player. And Ricky goes into the Hall of Fame. Dot goes into the Hall of Fame, the Softball Hall of Fame in 1970. Ricky goes in the Softball Hall of Fame in 1973. She was a great second baseman, fabulous second baseman. And so Ricky goes in the Hall of Fame as well. And these two Hall of Fame players are flipping houses together in the 1960s. At one point, they owned 50 houses in Phoenix, low-income housing that they would, make deals with folks, and they'd say, well, how much can you afford to pay? Well, I can afford to pay this per month. And they'd say, okay, we can work with that. And they would hold the papers. Dot and Ricky would hold the papers. They would fix up the houses themselves, everything, plumbing, roofing, all of it. They learned how to do all of this stuff themselves. And painting, and, I-17 was going in at the time, and I-10 was going in at the time. And they would go to the warehouses and scavenge parts from houses that had been torn down to make way for the highway. And that's how they would get cheap copper piping and PVC and all of this other stuff. And they did this, and they made more than $1 million doing it in the 1960s. I said, Dot, what did people think about you two women?
Right.
Doing this without any male figure, anything at all. Well, we were in business together. They just accepted it. Nobody ever said a word to us. We were good to them. They were good to us. That was it. Nobody ever asked a question, which is remarkable if you think about it. But they never, Dot never hid who she was. She never publicly, she didn't out herself until Ricky's obituary in 2011. But she didn't hide either. She didn't hide. She never, married for cover or any of that. They just lived together. And everybody knew it was Dot and Ricky, Dot and Ricky, Dot. I think the great nieces and nephews called Ricky Aunt Ricky. I think it was just the way it was. It's the way it was. Remarkable, really.
Well, and there were two women, June and Hammy, that had a machine shop up in Cave Creek. And there was a huge kind of newspaper article about them and their lives. And you would read it and never guess they were lesbians.
Wow.
That they were you would have thought they were only business partners. They had no other connection.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of shocking to be able to read that. And hearing that, it's so again, but also that time period where it's these two women were just hey, we're doing this together, and no one batted an eye.
Yeah. And, they had a home phone together, right? They didn't have separate phones. So anybody who needed something done at one of those houses would call the phone, and they would either get Dot or they'd get Ricky. How do you not figure this out, really? How do you not know?
Right.
And what's even more interesting to me, and this fascinated me, and I asked Dot about this many, many times, for her entire life, her entire 100+ years, but for as long as her parents were alive, her folks she either lived with her folks or her folks lived with her the entire time.
Wow.
The entire time. And I said, Dot, you went through all these partners. What did your parents think? Kay and Dot lived together. Mm-hmm. Kay and Dot lived together on 21st Avenue. And then St. Charles Street, they bought a house together. What did your parents think? This is the 1950s. Mm-hmm. And in the 40s, Dobby was staying over many nights, and before her peanuts, and poor Dot, I'm telling you everything. Oh, Dot, you player, you. And I don't mean the ball field. But anyway, I said, what did your parents think was going on? And she said, they loved everybody I brought home. They never asked a question. At one point, I think her dad had said to her, I'm so glad that you are so self-sufficient. You don't ever have to worry about a guy taking care of you, because I think he knew that it was never going to be that. But he never said it in so many words. Her mom never said it. Her dad passed away in 1958 when she and Kay were together, and they were living on St. Charles Street. And her mom passed away in 1973. And when she and Ricky were living on St. Charles Street. Same house. Never asked a question. Lived with them the whole way through.
Wow.
Remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess you know what you ask the questions you want to know the answers to, and you just don't ask the questions if you don't want to know the answers.
Yeah, that's what my grandmother always said. You never ask the question unless you want to know the answer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So there's the book. Is Dot being recognized any other way?
Fortunately, yes. And I've been working, I've been working hard on this, and others have been stepping in to help. I really appreciate it. And I'm happy to report that Phoenix will have a softball field named for Dot Wilkinson. It was approved in August by Parks and Rec, and the field has been identified, and it will happen in the next few months, I believe, and I'm not quite sure. They're still working out some of the details, whether there'll be upgrades to the field and things like that. But there is going to be a Dot Wilkinson field in Phoenix because, she's the 8th greatest Phoenix athlete, Arizona athlete of all time. She is the greatest female athlete in Arizona history. She has more than earned this. So yes, Dot is going to be honored with her very own field, which is as it should be.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Fabulous. And as for Lynn, I commend you for what you've done to push this forward for Dot. Because if no one does it, she would never have gotten the recognition that she deserves.
Could you imagine that?
Yeah. It's happened to many people. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, you are so welcome. I thank you guys for helping me to lift up Dot's story. It's a remarkable story. I hope everybody reads the book, Out at the Plate, the Dot Wilkinson Story, because it's really not just a story about Dot. It is a story. It's an LGBTQ story. It's a story about Phoenix's history. It's a story about the heyday. There it is. There it is. Look at that. Look at that.
And look at that great photo.
It's this, that I'll tell you a little bit about that photo in a second. Leave it there for a second, if you will, Marshall. So, this is the story of the heyday of women's softball, which, as you said, Dr. Bev, this is a time period that was being completely overrun, forgotten. And when Dot started telling me these stories, I had no idea that I was going to write a book about it. But the more I listened to her, the more I realized this is not the kind of thing you can Google. We're going to lose all of this history unless we do something right now to preserve it. Right. And thank God for Dot and her sharp, sharp memory all the way through until she passed away in March at age 101. She was sharp. She remembered everything. And she was able to tell me everything. That photo that you're looking at right there is a photo from USA Softball. And if you, that's the 1949 World Championships. The opening ceremony for it. And if you look really closely along the third baseline, you can see all those players who are lined up on the third baseline. Closest to home plate, there is a shorter player, and she's holding some papers. That's Dot. That's Dot. 1949 opening ceremony. The Ramblers at the time were the reigning world champions, and they would win this championship, 1949. It was the third world championship that they brought home to Phoenix. By the way, just to set a record straight here, the Ramblers were the very first team ever, male or female, to bring a championship to Arizona, to Phoenix. Just so you know. Now you say, in 1940. In 1949, the Ramblers won their very last world championship. This was the last one they won that year. They had many great years after that, but they never won again.
Wow. And then, Lynn, there are also some other photos that I think you could probably...
Yes. So that photo, the photo with the white, I don't know how it'll appear to everybody else. So I'll just say the photo with the white border was taken at South Mountain. It would have been taken in the 1940s. And you see Dot in the foreground in the plaid shirt. And the person whose lap she is occupying is Virginia Dobby Dobson, whom she was with from 1941 to 1955, when Dobby went off and got married. The other girls in that photo, women in that photo, young women, I don't know who they are. Dot couldn't tell me who they were, but they were friends, you know, probably from other teams who they invited up to South Mountain, because they often invited other teammates and friends and other teams up to South Mountain or Blue Point. They would go to Blue Point and party and listen to the radio and dance and have picnics and sometimes stay overnight. That was what they did. The picture on the right is that's Ricky sitting on the car with two of their dogs, and that's Dot. And they are at their cabin in Williams, Arizona. They had a cabin in Williams, Arizona that they bought in 1975 from a couple friends, a couple of lesbian friends, Helen and G, that they bought for $6,000 and paid off in 15 years. I think it was $60 a month that they paid for this cabin in Williams. The cabin is still in the family. She left it to her great nephew Justin, who's taking great care of it, according to Dot. And so this was them with two of their pups. I can't remember which two those are. One of those might be Gigi, which was one of Dot's favorites for sure. But that's Dot and Ricky in the 70s.
Wow.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. I got your history, hip historian. I got your history here.
Indeed. And so, okay, so we're talking about Dot, but also at this moment in time, the Diamondbacks.
Wow.
So how do you think Dot would be if she was hanging out at the house in South Phoenix?
Well, first of all, Dot is stealing signs in heaven and telling the Diamondbacks in their ear what they are. This is how Ketel Marte is getting all these hits. This is how he ended up being MVP of the last series. So let's start there. She's stealing signs and passing them on. But Dot, you know, when I would talk to her every night, and Dot was a huge Diamondbacks fan, a massive. She never missed a game if she didn't have to. And every night when we would talk, if the Diamondbacks happened to be on, Dot would be yipping in my ear about what was going on in the game. And so she would tell me, she would complain all the time that modern day players aren't as tough as she was, because, you know, they get like she would say, they get a hangnail and they're out. What would they do in my day when you had to catch 48 innings at a time? You know, this is horrible. These people, they're not, you know, ball players. They got to be ball players. And then she would go on about the rules. She hated umpires. Dot always hated umpires. She had a thing about it. And so she would complain about the umpires in the game. And she would say, you know, it's wrong that they don't let them block the plate anymore. Let them block the plate. What kind of game is this? You know, these wussy players who, you know, have to get out of the way and give the guy the plate. Of course he's going to score. How are you going to stop him if you can't block him? She'd go on and on and on about this. You know, I like this young guy, Nick Ahmed. Well, he's not with the team anymore, but that was like, she loved him as a shortstop. And then, you know, she would just pick a player every season that she fell in love with, who she thought exemplified the game, you know, the fierceness and the spirit of the game. But I am absolutely positive that Dot's up there in heaven cheering them on and you know, giving them signs. And if they win the World Series this year, I'm giving it to Dot. I'm going to give it to Dot because it's probably her doing. Sorry, players. Sorry, Derek Hall. Sorry, guys. But Dot's got it all going on up there. And if this happens, you can be sure it's because she, by golly, made it happen. Somehow she did. Yeah.
You know, Lynn, it's, you know, I have to agree with Doc Bev. It's like, you know, sticking, I mean, the fact that you called her every night, and I can only imagine the note cards I'm picturing on the wall with like almost like the thread trying to figure, okay, well, this story goes before this story, and where does this place go? So thank you so much for doing that.
Yes. You're very, very welcome. You know, I to all of you who are helping me lift up that story and lift the veil on this piece of fascinating and really important women's history. It's not just, you know, even if you didn't care about softball, if you care about history and women's history in particular and empowered women, this is what it is. You know, it's all of that. It's the history of Phoenix. It's women's history in the 40s and 50s and 30s. And, you know, it's LGBTQ history at a time when, you know, I've written a lot of historical fiction, and I could never, ever get anyone of that generation to talk to me about what it was like.
Yeah.
Dot is the very first person who was ever willing to talk to me out loud about what it was like to be gay in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, it was priceless history to me.
And also talking about the fact that, you know, they were getting friendly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's the thing. It's like people are like, oh no, I didn't have any stories. No. And it's like, no, I know you do. And like people are just, yeah. So I mean, that's so important to capture this history.
Yes. And you know, for me, it's honestly, it will come off as being trite maybe, but it's an honor to tell Dot's story. It's an honor to tell the story of all of these women and who they were and what they did in a time when they, you know, when that just wasn't done. But they did it. But they did. Well, and now everyone will know it.
Right. And I'm just thinking, you know, just the significance that just Dot and Ricky made in South Phoenix. Mm-hmm. It's like, I mean, in the middle of where we're in a housing boom now, where everything's going for top dollar and there's bidding wars. But to have someone say, how much can you afford? Let's work with you. Let's get you in a house.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they would rent to own. They would pay them, you know, $15 a month if that's what they had to work with. And for years afterwards, Dot would tell me, all of these people would come up to her in the grocery store and say, Miss Dot, I was in one of your houses and my parents lived there. And I remember growing up there and we still have the house. Wow. You know, I mean, they took such pride in it, and they over and over again, you would see this happen where people would come up and say, Miss Dot, I have one of your houses. I remember, you know, it wasn't just about the ball playing. They made a real impact in the city of Phoenix.
Right.
A real impact.
Wow.
Wonderful history to know. I thank you for it.
No, thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me and for wanting to talk about all this geeky stuff that I love.
Oh my gosh. Well, because we love it as well. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, capturing these stories that remind people, I mean, again, as we just are celebrating Pride here in Phoenix, the fact that we're only here because we're standing on the shoulders of so many other people.
Yeah, and that's the truth. And they did pave the way for the rest of us. They made everything that happened afterwards possible for the LGBTQ community, for women in sports, way before Title IX, way before Billie Jean King, way before all of that. There was Dot Wilkinson and her friends out there on the softball diamond, making it happen.
That's right. And so the book is out at the plate, the Dot Wilkinson Story. So can people find it on Amazon?
They can find it on Amazon. They can find it anywhere fine books are sold. They can find it.
Oh my gosh, maybe a local bookstore even? Oh no, not a local bookstore.
Changing hands in Phoenix and Tempe. I hope they have more copies now. They sold out when I was there, which was great.
Yeah.
I know that they were ordering more copies, so you can absolutely get it from Changing Hands. If you want autographed copies, you can get it from my local bookstore here in Asheville, North Carolina. It's called Malaprops, MALAPROP''S, Malaprops. They have signed books that I've signed for them. It's out in audiobook. It's out in Kindle. Hopefully someday it'll be out in paperback. It's out in hardcover right now. There are lots of beautiful pictures, including that one. Inside the book, that picture of her on the cover, it took me a long time to find out when that picture was taken. It was taken in 1940 because it is the only year that they wore white uniforms. They're wearing white satin. Hello, sliding into home wearing white satin. You gonna keep that? Are you gonna keep that clean? I don't think so.
And how comfortable. Because it doesn't breathe.
Right. No, it really doesn't. No. So they only wore those uniforms for that one year. It was the first year they won the world championships. And that picture is from the Arizona Republic.
Wow. And, you know, and just talking about the fact that they won 3 championships before the Diamondbacks were even thought of.
Right.
Right here in Arizona.
Right. It was 60 years before the Diamondbacks came into existence. Exactly. Yeah. If my math is right, it's exactly 60 years from the day that Phoenix won that championship until the inception of the Diamondbacks.
So, Lynn, again, thank you so much for the work you've done and coming on and helping share that story with Dot. And I hope we get chances to continue pushing that story so that way everybody will know who
Well, when we dedicate the field, come on out.
Try to keep me away.
Come on out when we dedicate.
Try to keep me away.
Yeah. Marshall, Dr. Bev, thank you guys so much. It's such a pleasure spending more time with you.
Indeed.
Thank you.
All right. Lynn, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds like a plan.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, man. That was fantastic. I love it. I learned so much just from listening to her speak about the history of the ball here in Phoenix,
Right. And the communities that Dot helped across so many. I mean, Jasmine's going to kick herself when she sees this and she's like, I wasn't there. So
I wish she could have been here to experience it. But then again, she can listen to the podcast.
She can listen to it. Exactly. So this will be up on Spotify, it'll also be up on AZ Gay History. It will be on, if I clicked on the right box, it will be on iTunes. So that way people can keep track of this. We're basically doing one a month. And so we're working already on who's going to be our guest for next month. So that's kind of exciting as well. So
very much so. We'll see.
Indeed. And then we've got Chandler Pride coming up next month as well. So it's an exciting time. There's lots of stuff going on.
Do you have the date for Chandler Pride?
It is November 18th, which is a Saturday. I don't know the times of it yet.
Are you going to have a booth?
So actually, I'm the MC for Chandler Pride this year. Yeah, they said, hey, do you want to do this? We think you'd be perfect for it. I would love to. So as we get closer, I definitely will know exactly where I'm supposed to be and when I'm supposed to be there. But I'm not there yet. Still getting through October. So
I will definitely be there to support Pride and to support you.
Okay. Very good. Well, I look forward to it. And it's like, and I also want to thank everyone else who out there is listening. Mm-hmm. I mean, getting to hear about Dot Wilkinson. And, we're going to keep bringing you more shows again. So already looking at the next few months, who are we going to have on? So I think we've got some exciting guests lined up. More on that as we actually can officially say, guess who's coming up next. But I mean, it's like, but Lynn, oh my gosh, what an amazing guest with an amazing story.
And go get the book.
Exactly. Go out there, get the book, whether it's the audio version. I'm intrigued. I want to see now who's reading the audio book. I'm like, who's doing that?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's so exciting to have what, it's like I'm working with a group. We're looking at doing an event early December. And one of the things we're talking about is like a top 10. What are the top 10 LGBT kind of folks in Arizona? And I'm like, Dot Wilkinson is going to be in that top 10 somewhere.
Right,
so
absolutely.
Just starting to kind of piece that together and just creating highlights of Arizona LGBTQ history.
And if anyone listening to the podcast would like to recommend someone to be in that top 10 list, let us know.
Indeed. Yeah. Please reach out. So, yeah. So, well, have a great rest of your day.
Marshall, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Oh, and thank you. I mean, oh my God. I mean, there are moments where I'm trying not to tear up as I'm hearing Dot's story.
I know.
So
we will be back again in another month.
Yep. We will definitely have a November episode coming up. So keep your ear to the ground and listen up. And so, all right. So Doc Bev, have a great rest of your day and we'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.
And you have been listening to the LGBTQ plus Storytime Community History. This month hosted by Marshall Shore and DrBev. Jasmine Kipp couldn't join us this evening, or as we're doing this. She will be back next month. We also want to give a shout out to Phoenix Arts and Culture with the City of Phoenix, as well as South Mountain Storytelling Institute. Thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.